Alright folks, how you doing? So I'm going to be going through this scene in Braveheart and breaking it down for you. First of all, Brian Cox, great actor, a Scottish actor from Dundee. He's been in a lot of things. He was in the Jason Bourne movies with Matt Damon, with a very dodgy American accent, I might add. He was also Agamemnon in the Troy movie. He's been in loads of stuff. But, you know, riding in on a white horse like that, like a total badass, you know. Hey, listen, I never said Braveheart was a bad movie. I just said it wasn't accurate.
William, I'm your uncle, Argyle.
Not really true. In real life, the main influential uncle in William Wallace's life was Ranald Crawford, and it was on his mother's side. So this line coming up is quite telling.
You have the look of your mother.
Now, I think that's a bit of a slight nod from Randall Wallace and Mel Gibson to the fact that Wallace took his stature from his mother's side of the family, because he was descended on his mother's side, on the Crawford side, from an Anglo-Danish chieftain from Northumbria called Thor Longus, or Thor the Tall. And Wallace was reported to be 6'9" in real life, so it's obvious, you know, which genetics were in play there in terms of his height and his stature. I mean, Wallace was descended from warriors on his mother's side, no doubt about that. In fact, if you look into Thor Longus, and I've made a video about that, he was granted lands in Scotland because he was such a valuable chief. I mean, that's basically how feudalism works. You know, if you're a great knight or a warrior, you know, you'll be given land in exchange for service. I mean, it's feudalism 101. Not really a huge fan of the fact that they're living in Skara Brae or some sort of Neolithic hovel, and you know, they seem to be eating like primitives. I mean, not a fan of that.
We'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow you'll come home with me.
I don't want to leave.
You didn't want your father to die either, did you? But it happened.
Jeez, Argyle, fucking lay off the kid, for God's sake, you know. Ranald Crawford was not anything like this, or Richard Wallace, who was another one of William Wallace's uncles. They were never dicks to him. Quite the opposite. Wallace had a very strong family unit around him at all times who sheltered him and protected him, particularly in the early days before he became an outlaw. I mean, Ranald Crawford, when you really get into it, and I will one day, he really stuck his neck out for his nephew. I mean, he put his own life on the line to protect his nephew, because Ranald was Wallace's mother's brother, his uncle on his mother's side. He really, and I mean really, stuck his neck out for William Wallace big time in the early stages of his rebellion.
Did the priest give a poetic benediction? The Lord bless thee and keep thee.
That's another thing I don't like about this movie. It seems to mix up Latin Christianity with Celtic Christianity, and they were not anywhere even near the same thing. But you're talking about Hollywood here, and so you're talking about a rather ignorant writing staff, to say the fucking least.
It was in Latin.
You don't speak Latin?
Yeah, you've got Latin Christian or Catholic priests talking in front of Celtic crosses. They're totally separate things. The Celtic Church was totally separate from Latin Christianity / Catholicism, depending on what source you go to, but still the point remains, and it's fucking annoying when you're looking at this and you can see that these things are not compatible at all, especially if you've read the works of Conor McDarry. I won't get too much into that here, but we'll touch upon that one day.
Well, that's something we shall have to remedy, isn't it?
Though I will say William Wallace did speak Latin in real life. He was multilingual. I believe he spoke French. I'm not totally sure. I know he definitely spoke Latin because of his interactions with a fellow called the Red Reaver, which I'll roll around to one day. But Wallace was highly educated and multilingual. He did speak multiple languages.
The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord cause his light to shine on thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Amen.
Now this is some made up bullshit for the movie. Doesn't make sense within the context of the real story.
Your heart is free. Have the courage to follow it.
Yeah, Wallace's rebellion was not based on anything like this, any sort of wisdom passed down from his father or whatnot, although it was based upon that somewhat, because Wallace's older brother and father were killed at Loudon Hill by English soldiers, but the whole idea that Wallace was dreaming about them and they were inspiring him and all this sort of thing. Actually, when Wallace was rising up in rebellion, even in the very, very early stages, like at Dundee, which I've covered before, it was more to do with him having a huge chip on his shoulder about it, and his Crawford relatives were trying to get him to calm the hell down and not cause a fuss, basically. Even his uncle Richard Wallace was like, just calm down, you know, stop doing what you're doing. But Wallace was just too idealistic and too stubborn and too arrogant and aggressive to listen to anybody, and he put his family in serious danger. I mean, the facts are the facts. I'm a big fan of Wallace, but I'm not going to shy away from that either. He was aware of it. He had to basically abandon and cut ties with his family multiple times in the early stages of his rebellions against the English in order to protect them, and he felt very guilty about it. But that didn't stop him, or even for that matter slow him down. You know, Wallace was not going to be tamed. He was like a wild horse, you know, you just couldn't tame him for anything. You know, and he did feel tremendous remorse and guilt about putting his family members in danger, both Ranald Crawford, you know, and Richard Wallace on both sides, you know. And it is true that Wallace's father's death, you know, really affected him massively. There's no doubt about that, but, you know, a lot of this is contrived Hollywood BS. Now, the real William Wallace would never have seen a bagpipe in his life until he went to the Lennox, because lowland Scottish culture is quite a bit different from Highland Scottish culture, even to this day, though not so much nowadays. But lowland Scots would not wear kilts, they wouldn't speak Gaelic, they probably would never have even heard of whiskey unless they travelled north. So the whole idea that Scotland has this homogenous culture which is universal across the land is just absolute bullshit. In fact, the image that we have of Scotland today was largely thanks to Sir Walter Scott. You know, let me just put it this way, there's a reason why he has a big, huge, massive monument in Princes Street, because he was pro-British. You know, it's a story largely for another time, but it's largely his propaganda, and that's the word for it, propaganda, that created this romantic image of the Highland Scots. But the Highland Scots are quite a bit different from Lowland Scots. There's not much that they had in common at all.
What are they doing?
Saying goodbye in their own way.
Playing the theme tune for the movie. Let's face it.
Playing outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes.
Now, no one has ever... This is annoying to me. Why the fuck is he calling it blurred pipes? What? No, bagpipes. It's called a bagpipe because it's a pipe attached to a bag. You know, really simple. It is what it is, but calling it blurred pipes, I never understood that. And by the way, they're playing Irish bagpipes because they filmed most of this movie in Ireland. And if I remember correctly from the commentary, Mel Gibson deliberately chose to use Irish bagpipes because he liked the sound of it better than Scottish bagpipes. Fair enough, I suppose. But there's the difference between Scottish tartans and Irish tartans, Scottish bagpipes and Irish bagpipes, Scottish Gaelic or Gaelic and Irish Gaelic. You know, there is a difference between Irish and Scottish culture. They're not the same thing. You know, and all the things which are similar in both are only that, similar. There are differences.
It was the same for me and your daddy when our father was killed.
Again, the real William Wallace was closer to his Crawford relatives than those on the Wallace side, because his mother was still alive, basically. It wasn't that William Wallace disliked anyone on his father's side, you know, through Clan Wallace, but it just happened to be that he was closer on his mother's side because his mother was still alive, basically. And Wallace was well trained in combat from an early age, so this is kind of true. Kind of. Wallace was described by Henry the Minstrel as the greatest warrior alive. You know, Henry the Minstrel compares William Wallace to King Arthur, you know, from British mythology, Welsh mythology. You know, like he was the greatest warrior who ever lived since the days of King Arthur. That's kind of how he puts it, but you know. And Wallace was a great warrior. He was a great commander. You know, if you follow Game of Thrones, he's kind of comparable in a lot of ways to Robb Stark. You know.
First, learn to use this. Then I'll teach you to use this.
Again, it's kind of a bit of a logic stretch that, you know, the Scots have really advanced weapons, but they live in hovels from the Neolithic era. You know, it's annoying to me because I pay attention to these things. But when you see the majority of the Scots and their weapons, so-called, and armour, so-called, asterisks, you know, supposed weapons and armour, they don't look anything near as advanced as this. So, you know, for those who have a stickler for detail, it's a bit of a logic stretch that they're still stuck in the Neolithic era close to the 13th century, and yet they can produce fine weapons somehow. Unless they stole it or something. But, you know, the depiction of the Scots in this movie is pretty much downright insulting. The Scots were way more advanced than this. But yeah, I mean, use your head first, and then you will learn how to, you know, wield weapons. It's a good message, you know, you got to think first and foremost with your head. And the real Wallace was an absolute master of warfare. You know, he was a tactical genius. I would say that he belongs up there in the same category as your Caesars or Alexander the Great or Napoleon, you know. For those of you who follow my videos about narcissism, all three of them, by the way, were greater narcissists. I don't believe William Wallace was a narcissist. But why, oh why, are they not teaching the tactics of William Wallace in, you know, West Point or Sandhurst is beyond me. You know, the military tactics of William Wallace were incredibly advanced and incredibly well thought out. You know, you can, like I said, you can make comparisons between, you know, William Wallace and Robb Stark from Game of Thrones. I mean, book Robb Stark, you know, because it's largely kind of glossed over in the show. You don't really see a lot of it, but, you know, if you read Game of Thrones, the novel, the book, and you read into Robb Stark's tactics, William Wallace was very comparable in that regard, very similar. hope you've enjoyed this analysis, and thank you for watching.